Any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
All right. Public comment. This is for any member of the public who may address the commission on a non-agenda matter. Do we have any speaker slips?
I have no speaker slips, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. And notices that the lease review subcommittee meeting scheduled for Thursday, September 2nd was canceled. The regular airport commission meeting scheduled for Wednesday, September 15th was canceled. The lease review subcommittee met on Monday, September 27th, as did the budget subcommittee on Monday, September 27th. And on Thursday, October 14th, the airport secretary duly posted this agenda. All right, the consent calendar. Do we have any items to remove from the consent? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to accept the consent calendar as written.
I'll second it.
All in favor of approving the consent calendar as submitted?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the consent calendar carries. It passes. Thank you. The liaison reports. We do have our City of Goleta liaison, Councilmember Ed Easton. We always appreciate your being able to join us.
It's a great pleasure to be able to be here and be able to tell you something that perhaps you don't know. I've just come from a joint meeting of Sheriff's Department, CHP, CSB, police. Basically, the public meeting to explain what's going to happen on Halloween. And Halloween is on Sunday, and so it's going to be Halloween weekend. I wouldn't go over there. The parking will be minimal. There's going to be parking available for charge at Gersh Park and in some of the undeveloped lots there. That's basically the only place anybody's going to want to let you park. The fundamental strategy, which has been true for some years now, is to say to people from out of town, you really don't want to come here. Because if we can get those people to not come, if the party isn't any fun, then they won't come. And this will be the last weekend, Halloween, for the next 5 years. So hopefully we can make this a local affair. There's an orange folder piece of paper right there about it being a local affair. But we are going to have all kinds of cops out there, both protecting what happens in Isla Vista, but also in the surrounding neighborhoods that get a lot of traffic and parking and then drunks later on in the evening. So avoid the area if you want to, or go and try it out and see what happens. But you're going to find a police officer pretty soon. I think Sunday night probably things will diminish, but Friday and Saturday are going to be pretty full-fledged coverage by the combined law enforcement of the whole region, as well as emergency people and so on and so forth. Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope for the best, but I do know that it's been posted at UCLA, UCSB, and practically every school around. But I hope we can have a better one, too. I know you all are working hard on it. And I've talked to the sheriff, and he's doing everything they can, but it is happy time for everybody, supposedly.
Well, as our enforcement officer said to me, it's an event that is unsponsored by anybody. Nobody's responsible for it. It costs the county about $1 million.
Yeah.
And we discussed this at a town gown conference last week out at UC Riverside. And the things that everybody fears that the enforcement people are watching are the events like Flotopia that happened here, happened in San Diego before that, that just arise out of internet communication, and all of a sudden you've got 20,000 people in one place that is not ready for them, and nobody's ready for them. So everybody's watching that and fearful of it. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
I do too.
Yeah. Thank you. That's all the news from Goleta.
That's plenty. You've got a lot going on. Hey, thank you. Just want to have the record show that Commissioner Griffin has joined us. And that moves us along to administrative reports. Item 13, Air Service Development. And we have a presentation.
We do. With recent developments in air service at our airport with some loss of service, we've had numerous citizens and business groups concerned that while it came kind of each one came on the heels of another, I'm sure it made them feel like we were losing all of our air service, and what was the airport doing about it? So I made a presentation to City Council on October 12th, and I thought I would repeat it here. I probably won't do as good a job as our consultant, Kevin Shore, did with the end of the presentation, but I'll do my best. He's really the expert. Okay, there we go. We're going to, I'll give you a little bit of background. We'll talk about some of the factors that influence air service decisions that are made by the airlines, what our status is, and then kind of what we do in terms of air service development, kind of an overview. For the council presentation, I had the first bullet at the bottom, and I decided I needed to move it to the top. Airports do not have any authority over the airline rates, routes, or their market entry or exit. And this all came about because of the second bullet, airline deregulation. Before 1978, the federal government, through the Civil Aeronautics Board, regulated all the domestic interstate air transport routes, and they operated as a public utility. They set fares, routes, and schedules. And one of their goals was to promote air travel, to hold the fares down in short-haul markets, and to subsidize the fares to the long-haul markets. They wanted to ensure that the airlines made a reasonable rate of return. But the Deregulation Act removed government control over fares, routes, and market entry of new airlines in the commercial aviation industry. The FAA continued to have their regulatory powers over safety, but in terms of the market, the airlines were then free to go forth and make a profit. What happened was that many small airports lost air service because it was being subsidized, and then anybody that thought they could ever run an airline started an airline, and subsequently many of those went bankrupt, and even the larger ones in subsequent years. But it did mean more choices for air travelers and lower fares. There are 382 primary airports in the United States. They're classified as different size hubs. Large hub, there are only 29 large hubs in the United States. So that's what's accounting for 68% of the passengers. So basically, starting from a non-hub, which is like San Luis Obispo or Santa Maria, small hub, which we are, medium hub would be San Jose, for instance, and large hub, LAX, San Francisco, Seattle, and then going across the country, and I'll show you in a map in a minute. But it's obvious from the chart that the small airports, there's a lot of them, and they're feeding passengers to the hubs. This map doesn't show up too well. This is a map showing where the hubs are located. As you can see, most of the large hubs are on the East Coast. On the West Coast, there's only 4. So we don't really have, I guess, our fair share, but we don't have as intense population either. The 37 medium hubs are kind of in the northeast and some on the West Coast. Small hubs, again, are more in the Midwest and East Coast, and you can see there's very few on the West Coast. Non-hubs, such as San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria, the majority of airports are that size. And they only account for 3% of the in-plane passengers. So, again, they're feeding to the major hubs. Historic passenger growth, this chart shows since 1961. Our line is in the blue on top, and the U.S. Passenger count is in the magenta below that. They're on two different scales, obviously. We don't have more than the whole United States. But you can see through recessions, which are the R's at the bottom of the chart, and through different world events such as the Gulf War, September 11, that the airline industry goes up and down in relation to responding to those events. In good economic times, it goes up. In bad, it goes down, or if there's something like September 11th, it goes down. But over time, it continues to go up. And our Tri-County airports, our Santa Barbara Airport accounts for 62% of the daily departures. In the whole Tri-Counties with the 4 airports, there are approximately 2,200 seats a day that are offered, and 67% of those seats are offered at our airport. Recently, Oxnard Airport lost all their service, which was being mostly subsidized by the military because of Point Mugu being in proximity. Santa Maria has lost a good share, as well as San Luis Obispo, and you can see what the rest of the market share is amongst the 4 airports. Currently, in 2009, we had about 747,000 passengers. Year to date, we're up about 1%. We currently have 5 airlines. We recently had Frontier start service. They are a low-cost carrier, and that has really helped keep our passenger count even and a little bit above even with the loss of recent service. We have 5 nonstop destinations to 5 major hubs, 31 daily departures, and about 1,500 seats a day. This chart I just did because I thought it was interesting. I was looking in the file and how many airlines that have been here since deregulation started in 1978. Of course, United has been here since 1936. But as you can see, from 78 to 87, that is the proliferation of airlines when everybody thought they could be an airline, run an airline, and most of those airlines have gone bankrupt and went bankrupt sometimes in the same year they started service. And then as we go over in 10-year increments, in the yellow are airlines that the airport pursued through their air service development program. And as you can see, it kind of got less and less and less over the years as airlines went bankrupt and were acquired by larger airlines. I just thought it was an interesting chart. It, kind of a gee whiz kind of thing. This chart shows our passenger enplanements versus our available seats. The available seats are in the dark blue or the purple, and the passengers are in the lime green. And you can see we still have a little bit of a cushion. If you're on a 6 o'clock flight, you probably wouldn't believe this. You'd believe we're always full. But during the midday, during off-peak times, that we do have seats that aren't filled. And so we still have a little bit of cushion that we could fill up. And nationwide, the airlines have reduced seats over the past 2.5, 3 years, not only at our airport. One of the questions that has been asked with this recent loss of service is, well, why are you building a terminal? Well, obviously this started a long time ago. We're more than 30% complete, as attested by the picture down there. The economy actually played in our favors. We got very favorable bids and financing, as you'll remember. And major capital projects like this is a $63 million project, take many years from design through construction. And I don't know that you could ever do a whole project when the airline industry is at one of its peaks. I mean, you have to go through a couple peaks and valleys to finish the project. The new terminal will meet today's passenger demand with a little bit of cushion for the future, so this is needed now, as we all know. And as an enterprise fund, when our revenues go down, we adjust our budget to meet what our obligations are, and of course the debt service for the terminal will be one of our obligations. Factors that influence air service decisions. The airlines look at, probably number one is profitability. I don't know of any private business that would offer a product that wasn't profitable and continue to offer it in spite of its lack of profitability. Well, the airlines are the same way. They need to make a profit, and they have shareholders to answer to. So that is one of their main things that they look at when they're looking at service into a community. Also is aircraft availability. Do they have the right size aircraft available in their fleet to come into our market, for instance? You know, if they have a 767, you know, it's going to be too big for our market. It's too many seats. So even if they wanted to, if an airline wants to go into a community, if they don't have the aircraft available at that time, they're not going to be able to serve the market. Is it compatible with their market strategies and hubs that they want to make sure that they have a big presence at? Is there enough O&D or origin and destination traffic? Are there enough passengers that are going for Salt Lake City, for instance, from here to Salt Lake City and ending their trip in Salt Lake City and not using it as a connecting hub? Delta, when they pulled service, one of the reasons that they said that they pulled the service is that we didn't have enough local traffic going just to Salt Lake City. So that's something to consider, and possibly each airline has a different percentage that they're looking for. Impact of mergers. When two airlines merge, you're merging fleets, you're merging markets, and that could impact a small airport like ours through no fault of our own. It's just because of the change of their strategies. And code-share or capacity purchase agreements. In the case of San Jose with SkyWest, SkyWest has a code-sharing agreement with United. SkyWest was flying the San Jose market as their own, as SkyWest, not as United. And the load factors were very low, in the 30%. Well, if United is offering them more of a financial reason to fly United routes, they're going to obviously drop, you know, any route that they're flying at their own risk, especially when it's not doing well or not making a profit. So that's what happened with San Jose. So these agreements that the major airlines have with their regional partners can affect whether an airline flies at your airport or not. The airport has had an air service development program since 1978. We look at what our deficiencies are and where we can identify an airline to do where we could do better. We do passenger and business surveys to find out where our passengers and local businesses would need to go. We do a leakage analysis, which we'll be doing in the next several months, which identifies passengers that are from our area that could use our airport that are driving to Los Angeles Airport. And then we figure out why they're doing it and then try and develop strategies for getting them back. You know, if the fares are too high or if our schedules aren't quite right, we're not going to be able to get all of them back, but hopefully we'll be able to get a certain percentage back. Airline presentations, we go to airline corporate offices and meet with their planners and make our case, present data that hopefully will convince them that we have the market for them to be successful here with whatever service we're trying to get. Air service conferences, our consultant refers to these as kind of like speed dating. These are where the airlines and the airports go to the same conference. The airlines have tables set up around a room, and airports have made appointments in 20-minute increments, and they switch every 20 minutes, and then you have that 20 minutes to make your case and to speak directly to the airlines. And if we have interested airlines that we know that are interested in Santa Barbara, we definitely make sure that we have appointments with them and spend that time trying to make our case. Or existing airlines, finding out if they're happy. Are their loads good? Are they making a profit? Are they happy with the service that they're providing here? And if not, what can we do to make them happy? This is where the consultant's part of the presentation came in, so hopefully I'll be able to do as good a job as he. The global airline industry is projected to make a profit, $3.5 billion of that in North America. However, as Kevin Shore said, that doesn't make up for the $58 billion that they lost over the last year, 2 years or so. U.S. airline, August over August, they're up. Passengers are up. Their fares are up, which I'm sure they're happy about, and the revenues are up, which they're really happy about. However, demand for domestic air travel remains depressed. Domestic capacity is growing very conservatively at about 2% October of 2010 over October 2009. Any aircraft deliveries that are being made right now are for replacement purposes. So they're taking an aircraft out of their fleet and they're putting the new one in. They're not adding to their fleet. And their break-even load factors continue to exceed 75%. In the good old days, you might expect to see a vacant middle seat. Now you're probably hard-pressed to find a vacant middle seat. So they're requiring that the aircraft be fuller and fuller for them to make a profit. Kevin said when the fuel prices were at their highest, that some airline executives told them they needed more than 100% load factor to be able to make a profit. In other words, they were losing money hand over fist. Oil prices are high and are projected to rise further. They're not as high as they were, but the airlines would like them to be lower than they are at the moment. Recent gains and losses, I'll start with the good news, is we were able to attract Frontier Airlines with service to Denver. And one of the questions that we were asked by the public was, why attract a competing carrier to Denver? I mean, you already have service to Denver. Well, United's flights we tried for years to get United to keep 3 daily flights to Denver. And seasonally, they would take out that 3rd flight after summer was over. And we'd have 90% load factors, which essentially is full. And so we know that the passengers were driving down to L.A. When Frontier came in, United is still at 90, and I believe that Frontier's like at 80%. So that means we're probably still losing, with 5 flights a day, passengers to who can't get a seat to Denver or through Denver. And why Frontier? Frontier is a low-cost carrier. Their fares are very, very reasonable, and any kind of fare competition like that will hopefully encourage United to lower their fares as well to be competitive. So it never hurts to have competition. Recent losses, we had SkyWest Airlines, United Express to San Jose. That was really felt very hard by the tech community. But the load factors, as I mentioned before, were about 30%. And SkyWest just could not continue to fly at their financial risk, a route that they weren't making money, when they could fly for United at no risk. They could make money flying for United. SkyWest Delta connection to Salt Lake City, there were a number of reasons that Delta pulled that service. One was that they felt they weren't making the yield that they needed to make. We said, make the fares higher then. And they said we did, but then the passengers, were sensitive to that, and we didn't sell as many seats. They also were, with their merger, which I'll talk about in a minute, with Northwest, need to put airplanes into their northeast hubs, and sold we wanted to get rid of their regional jets, which were flying out of here. So when they sold the regional jets, they weren't getting any other aircraft to backfill for that. So we kind of lost on a number of fronts with that service. Horizon to Sacramento, this was a bitter pill to swallow also. Horizon just started making a profit on Sacramento, but they had made also a corporate decision that they were going to fly and attend to Alaska's routes and build Alaska. So it was a decision to pull the service because the decision was made when we weren't doing very well, and so at the last minute they weren't going to change their mind. So as I'll discuss in a minute, we're working on all of those to try and get them back, but those are the reasons that we lost those routes. And what do we do to replace lost service? We don't just sit around and go, oh my. We are always in constant communication with the air carriers that serve our airport, or that carriers that we're trying to convince to come to Santa Barbara. Probably at least once a week. Both the consultant and Terry Gibson, our marketing coordinator, are in contact with our airlines. We market the airlines that serve this airport, since the airlines don't do any kind of regional type of advertising. Mostly they do national advertising. We attend the Air Service Development Conferences, which I talked about, headquarter meetings, as I spoke about, and we've developed partnerships with the local chambers, Conference and Visitors Bureau, and local companies. Recently, Citrix Online sponsored a forum of the high-tech businesses to discuss what we could do about the loss of San Jose. Kathy Janega Dykes from the Conference and Visitors Bureau went with our staff and consultant to Horizon's headquarters when we got Sacramento service, and having the data that the CVB brought to the meeting was very helpful and instrumental in us getting the service. We also work with our consultant to understand what kind of overall trends are, the market dynamics, as well as his contacts within the industry. And we have I guess we'd call it a strategic plan. And our priorities are to maintain our current service, replace recently lost or other discontinued routes. We haven't given up on DFW. I mean, we lost that some time ago. So we don't just stay in the present. We also want to get back service that we've previously lost. We want to add service that helps facilitate connections to the East Coast. Sometimes it can be kind of frustrating for passengers not to be able to get easily to the East Coast. And increase our presence with low-cost carriers such as Frontier. Reduce our leakage to other airports. Maintain working relationships with airline network planners and schedulers. You notice we didn't say CEOs. Those aren't the people that make the decisions of where the airplanes go. It's the planners and schedulers that do that. And then promote a community and corporate involvement in air service development. It's very important to have that kind of partnership. And in some instances, it could be that, particularly like a route like San Jose, is in order to convince an airline to pick up a route that was discontinued by another airline, which is kind of a hard sell, we might have to, or the corporate community might have to guarantee pre-sold tickets, that type of thing. So there are are many kinds of strategies we try to keep our service. Airline mergers with Delta and Northwest. What the airlines do when they merge is try and play on each other's positive aspects or strengths. In Delta and Northwest, Delta was strong in Latin America, Europe, New York, the Southeast, and Northwest in Detroit and Minneapolis. By combining the two fleets, they have 740 airplanes. These three mergers put American Airlines, in terms of total fleet, kind of after them, which is kind of the reason that airlines do that, not only to go to have more routes, but also it helps build their fleet. Let's see, I talked about Delta taking RRJs and others like it to build the Northeast hubs, and they want to build New York and their Washington hub. United and Continental, their combined fleet was 697 aircraft. United strong in Asia, the West Coast, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Continental strong in New York City, the South, and Latin America. So, but the combination there gave them more cities as well as a larger fleet. Southwest and AirTran, we're told that it's about four things. It's about LaGuardia, Boston, Logan, Washington Reagan, and Atlanta. Southwest didn't have a big presence in any of those airports, and AirTran did have a sufficient number of gates. And then also the combined, they both have a similar fleet, and the combination, built their fleet and gave them a bigger presence at those hubs. And people have asked also why we don't get Southwest. And believe me, we've tried. I mean, in terms of letting them know of our interest. However, Southwest requires about 10 departures a day on a 737. That's a lot of seats. And Southwest isn't always the cheapest fare, contrary to urban legend. But in our small market, I don't think that we could fill that many seats a day, particularly when you've got Southwest at Burbank and Los Angeles, only 90 miles away. And if you ask Southwest, why don't you serve our airport, they'd go, or our community, they would say, well, we are. We're in Burbank and we're in Los Angeles, because their market areas obviously overlap ours. So we'll keep trying, and maybe someday they'll change their model to more of a small regional model, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But we will keep trying. So that's kind of what's going on in terms of the impact to us of recent losses and the gain of Frontier, and then there is some potential with the mergers for an upside for us, possibly. So with that, I conclude my presentation.
Well, thank you. An excellent presentation, a lot of good information. I was actually wondering, not always do the presentations end up on the city website. I know all the kind of the official documents do, but this would be one that would actually be pretty useful to have out there kind of for reference.
I agree, and
Get that.
I've asked our staff to put it on our website.
Great.
Also,
Thank you.
so.
So I'm sure there's questions, discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I attended this briefing with the city. Our mayor brought up a point about advertising more and doing things. And I do want to point out that Karen and her staff and them have been doing this. The sides of buses, everything. They've made movies. They've done all kinds of things to try to promote it. I don't know right off, but if anybody's got any ideas, please do. I did notice one thing, though. Some of the airports are putting in perks. This came in AOL. Such things as nappy nooks, so you can take a nap at the airport. In case we have our illustrious governor reporting, they're even got to light up a cigar place. All kinds of things on perks. Now, this is a little facetious, but maybe, I can't quite think, because of the type of airport we are, most of the people are not here for hours unless we had a cancellation.
Right.
But if there is things, any way that we can improve our advertising or mission or whatever, please pass them on.
We'll have restrooms in the waiting areas along with food. That's a pretty
Yeah.
good perk in our new terminal.
Well, and I think that with the new terminal, that a lot of the complaints that we get right now, which are no restrooms in the hold rooms, water out of a machine that costs money, no food in the whole, all those kinds of things, the amenities that you've come to expect, we will have. And I think that will help in terms of making it a more pleasant place to fly out of. We get comments, it's kind of equally divided. Like, what are you running a third-world airport? And the other is, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So everybody has their own personal taste, but I know that, our hold rooms are very crowded, and not having restrooms and not having some of just basic amenities makes the travel experience not very fun. But I think fares and schedule really are drivers for people. People will put up a lot with a lot if the fares are cheap enough, or if the schedules are just right. I mean, I have people that tell me they don't like flying on prop airplanes, but if the fare is cheap enough, they'll practically fly on the wing. I mean, so anyway, I think we need to just keep working on making our service the best it can be for a small community. It's not ever going to be like LAX, and maybe thank goodness.
Well, I certainly don't know anyone who actually enjoys getting themselves down to LAX. It is,
I
as you
agree.
said, it's about the fares. Yeah.
I think another valid point is also the ease of which boarding and going through TSA here as opposed to larger hubs. And that is worth a great deal in addition to low fares.
Right, I agree. Convenience is really one of our best selling points. There's nothing like going through security relatively quickly, and there's nothing like coming home and walking a few hundred yards to your car. So,
You mentioned doing a movie about that subject of going to L.A. and what it costs and so on and so forth. I'd like to see that sometime. I'd like to know sometime, maybe as a separate, we have some slack time, what some of our promotion is.
okay.
Just as a, I tune in and look at our website, I look at the cities, I look at the chambers. I don't know. I don't
No, I
know
think
where else to go.
I think that's good. I mean, we can have one evening in the next couple of months just to show you what our promotional activities are. And years ago, we did do a movie on, or not a movie, an ad driving to L.A. where you actually, we had the bumper-to-bumper traffic and all that. We also have a flight calculator on our website where you can calculate what it costs you to drive down to LA, LA and park, versus the small difference in the airfare. So people should try that, if nothing else, just to kind of get a perspective.
Commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Karen, the subject of leakage was mentioned there, and I didn't know if you were going to expand on that further, or it was going to be a topic of discussion downstream, but I'm curious to know how Santa Barbara Airbus is doing, how much of an opportunity is to convert some of that business to keep here. One of the line items that wasn't on the economics was, there was a line item on revenue growth, but there's no mention of net income, which may be proprietary, but these are all publicly held companies. Be interested to know, ticket sales, employment's are up, but where's net revenue or net income? Because all we're hearing about is how expensive it is to operate there, but it really doesn't underscore, what kind of losses they're incurring. You can bring in all sorts of revenue and still lose, right?
Right, and And our airport costs actually are pretty low
Right.
in comparison to airports our size. We're more on the lower end of the scale.
Exactly.
And even with the new terminal, we'll still be mid-range to low. So it's not our cost, it's them not being able, the airline not being able to,
It's fuel costs, it's
Right,
interest
employees
expense,
and so
it's,
forth.
pensions and all that wonderful
Right.
stuff. And then just really a general comment about the importance of this new terminal and what it's going to provide in the new environment. People are going to be happy about that. And I know your staff is really dedicated on improving those things that you can control, which are very, very little, right?
right.
But it seems to me that the heads of those local airlines that are here and all the service providers, I don't know how often you all meet, but it seems like you all have a vested interest, at least for the first, just to make sure that the launch is not only well done, but it continues to be well, because people are going to be coming in, they're going to be talking about it. They're going to be your best salespeople about it. Hey, have you seen the new terminal? The customer service, what have you. So I think it's a great opportunity to team up with your vendors and your service people there.
I agree. We are also trying to get some of the airline corporate people to come down here and see what our community is like. And we've had, I know when Horizon came down, their executives, they thought, when they went home, they went, I want to come back. I
Sure they
mean,
do.
they kind of got it once they got here. I mean, we're more than just a pretty face. We have a lot to offer in terms of the business community, the university, and so forth.
I'd like to thank you for the presentation. It was very good. And as you mentioned, Chris, it seems like we're really following along with the market and the economy. And there's a lot of things that are out of our control. And so while I was watching, I was making some notes of things. We should probably try to focus on things we can control. And maybe instead of reaching out to, it seems like we're reaching out to the major hubs and we're trying to reach into the major airlines. Maybe we should start targeting non-hub areas so we can increase our numbers and make ourselves more attractive for those airlines to come to us. The map that showed where all the locations were was very interesting because the East Coast has the population. Certain areas of the West Coast does, but there's a lot of pockets that just aren't served. But if you pool all those areas together with the non-hubs or with smaller carriers, then the major hub airlines would start to seek us out. I was also interested in maybe ideas that would shift our focus toward cargo or general aviation during the slack times. We're looking for ideas, and I remember when I first got on this commission, I was all about possibilities and very excited about things. So, and one of the ideas I had at the time was that we're in the closest proximity to the Pacific Rim, and if we could find ways to branch into that market, and I know we're limited on runway size and distance and what could actually land and take off at our airport, but there's a whole market out there, and we may be looking east and over, forgetting about west. Some ideas.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, when the aviation or commercial aviation is depressed, generally the whole aviation industry is depressed. But one thing that we have done with San Jose since our commercial carrier discussions have kind of not gone anywhere with the commercial carrier is we interviewed, I think, 3 or 4, maybe more than that, charter carriers here on the airport to offer them up to the high-tech community for them to organize themselves to be able to, get chartered flights to San Jose until we can get scheduled service. So we've done some interviews, and we have 3 or 4 that are, I think about 3 that are good possibilities for the high-tech community. And then we'll meet with them and kind of hand it off to let them pursue it. There's kind of we can't we're not a travel agent as well, so there's kind of a limit to where we can go, but we do try and reach out to kind of think out of the box.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that are out of our control completely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe, on that note, maybe making some incentives for the smaller carriers or commuters who might make it more business-friendly to come to our airport. Something else.
We do have an incentive program for the airlines for new service, which gives them up to a year of a waiver of the landing fees. We do some marketing for them, and what else?
That's it.
That's it. That was kind of what we felt was it with what we could afford to do, and that's what we did with Sacramento. So in terms of many of the regional airlines now, I understand there's a couple of very small airlines, or they might even be just charter at this point, but would like to get into more scheduled service. They're on the East Coast. We've also talked with them because they have an interest in the West Coast and kind of breaking out here. But many of the regional carriers have partnerships with the major airlines, so they're not very
Free to go.
accepting or free to break out on their own and do point-to-point flying, which is kind of too bad. But it's
Yeah.
kind of the way the industry has
That
developed.
makes it tough.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Anything else? On to our next item, the capital improvement program. We have a presentation, and then I believe you're asking for comments to forward to council.
Yes, sir, we are. This is the capital program for fiscal year 2012 through 2017. We do this on an annual basis. We update our capital improvement program, and
We'll get there.
There we go.
I will add that the budget subcommittee did review the presentation on the 27th.
That's true. Thank you. So once again, the capital program is a plan. It is not a budget. It is a plan of projects that are needed over a period of years, recognizing that in our case, because of our location, some new projects require up to a year of planning, design and planning, and permitting because we're in the coastal zone. So many times we will have projects where we separate the funding into at least 2 years. The definition, as you know, is $100,000 or greater with a life expectancy of 5 years. It is a long-term planning document, as I said, and ours is more than just those projects that we fund with additional airport money, but also we use the same document as a guide when we put together the FAA required and also the state required capital improvement programs for federal funding. We don't receive state funding, but we do receive federal funding. We also try to focus on maintaining our airport assets, our buildings, runways, taxiways, lighting systems, our infrastructure, water and sewer, and then, of course, anything that is required out on the airfield. During our budget subcommittee, Commissioner Miller asked maybe for a little bit of information of what we have funded in the past, sort of where's our status. We keep seeing what you're planning to do, but not a lot of information on what you have accomplished. In addition to the airfield improvements, which were pretty much completed 2007, 2008. In fact, we're finalizing right now the final mitigation for that project, which was a little over $35 million. $2.4 million of that amount was airport funding for the 5% match for the FAA grants. So we completed that with the safety overrun areas, taxiway, Mike, major environmental work. In addition to that, we have the airline terminal. As you know, that's been on the books for a long, long time as well. Total estimated cost for that is around $63 million by the time we complete the widening of Taxiway Bravo, the ramp work, relocating boats, parking. So to give you a status, we've completed the temporary improvements, as you know, that's done and paid for. And Phase 2 is a little over 30% complete. We're on budget. I'm not sure about on schedule. It rained recently, so that could throw a hitch in our get-up. The airport water system was also an improvement that we submitted for your review and consideration, and you recommended approval. That time we thought the cost would be $680,000, and that's to provide a loop system on the airport. Once again, we had very favorable construction contracts. That project is complete, and as you can see, came in at $406,000, so a savings there for us. Additionally, the airport sewer system is under construction. You'll notice on Firestone Road, we are working jointly with the Goleta Sanitary District on that project. We will centralize the lift stations on the airport that were put in by the military back in 1942. We anticipated at the time this plan was also designed that it would cost a little over $2.2 million. When bids came in, the total cost for the airport, that's airport share, I might point out, which is 51% of the total cost of the project. But instead of the airport paying 2.2, it actually came in at a little over $1 million. So we're very pleased with that. And they tell us that they're 80% complete. They're working on the lift station at this point. So they're getting very close to finishing that project. Firestone drainage, you'll remember the picture of the 3 houses in the flooded street. We've had some difficulties coming up with a solution for that. Planning and engineering have been working on it throughout the year. We have a couple of preliminary design concepts that we're passing downtown for their input and making sure that we stay within the stormwater regulations and other design criteria. So we're doing the planning and permitting, but I'd say we're about 5% complete. So what we have is, in our current budget, we have the design and permitting dollars already funded. We're going to wait to fund the construction once we have an idea of what it is we're doing. So that project will come back to Airport Commission, the next iteration of this plan. We also, in spending airport dollars, a new FAA requirement are hold short markings on the airport, and I want to say there's 30, 40 different markings that need to be done. Those that are at the main runway, 725, Tracy has investigated and is recommending that we do thermoplastic markings because once we paint, the paint erodes, and it's just a constant maintenance and upkeep. With thermoplastic, it goes on and has a life, I believe he's at close to 10 years before we'd have to replace them. Street resurfacing, this year we had $150,000 for AOA, $150,000 street resurfacing. If you go down past the maintenance yard, we have several buildings that are occupied, have been for my time at the airport. We need to do some paving there, and that's the project we'll do as soon as the rainy season is over.
Can I ask you before you move on, is the thermoplastic markings, would that be on runways also?
It's for the main, it's hold short lines on the 725, all of them,
Okay.
or 725
Has
in
he
the
looked
main.
into the braking effects on that? I'm not familiar with that on surface for braking with aircraft. Would it affect?
They're approved by FAA, so I'm assuming that I don't know that answer.
I mean, from that
John?
standpoint, it's like a painted line
Okay,
with the tire season.
okay. But we can certainly come back with more detailed information about it and have Tracy Lincoln provide more information if you'd like, because it's going to be a major project.
It would be something he probably would look into anyway, but the first thing I was thinking is if it's on the runway for safety issues, we should make sure that was an approved
sure.
use.
Right, because it's approved by the FAA, I can't imagine that there's an issue. But it is kind of an interesting process, and it's relatively new. So I think maybe at the next meeting when Tracy is here, we could ask him to give you a little more information about it.
Okay.
'Cause-
Hazel, before you run off here, I know you're
Run
run off. Just to refresh my memory on, we talked about Clyde Adams Road here.
Yes.
The roadway systems that we have here are, they're dedicated city streets, right? No?
We have dedicated city streets north of Hollister when we did the infrastructure improvements in the late 90s.
Right.
Airport streets south of Hollister are not dedicated city streets.
I see.
They're airport streets and airport responsibility.
Thank you for the distinction.
Okay. Lessee building maintenance this year, Hangar 5 is the big hangar that's just sitting right next to our brand-new terminal. We really want to get it painted and cleaned up before we open next spring. That's a high priority for us. Also, another one of our buildings, which is just right next door to Airport Administration, has multiple tenants, and we've done interior upgrades, and we're also doing some exterior. We just need to get that painted as well. So that will be another priority. Utility infrastructure and hazardous materials, we use that as an as-needed basis during the year. For fiscal year 2012, our capital plan totals airport funded $791,000, FAA is 2.5. We gauge FAA funding based on what we anticipate our entitlement grant to be. If we have projects that meet FAA's definition for discretionary funding, which is safety as the primary projects, then we would also submit to FAA for discretionary money. So here we go with this year, the wash rack. This was in our program last time. We've updated the cost, and it will not be located here. This gives you an example of what it's going to look like, but it will be located in the airfield adjacent to the aircraft wash area, and it's primarily for our airport sweepers and other airport equipment. Once they do the sweeping of the runways, and we need a big area for that. We also need it for the ARF vehicles because they're too big for this, and they also need to be on the airfield. This is across the street from the fire station, this particular location. So in discussions with the firefighters, we decided it needed to be inside the AOA, so that's why we're going to locate it next to the aircraft car wash, the aircraft wash rack. So it will cost us a touch more money because we need to tie into a bigger area and tie into the existing water and sewer.
And this is all in conformance with our stormwater permit.
Yeah.
Hazel, operationally, you've got, that's an exposed drain there. Is there any mitigation for stormwater?
We have an oil water separator
Right.
at this particular location,
Right.
and we'll have at the other one.
But there's you're not processing it beyond that. This is water that's ultimately going into what? Your gray water system, stormwater, what?
It goes into the sewer system, gray water sewer system.
Okay. So the reason I'm focusing on this is because you couldn't do this otherwise in the city without it being covered, just to prevent rainwater from going in. They don't want rainwater in their sewer system.
It has a valve on it, and I'm not the one
Yeah.
to explain this,
Right.
but it does have a valve that does shut down in case of rain, that it doesn't allow that in.
Doesn't allow it.
I'm not exactly, but I know that because of that issue specifically. Okay. The other new project that we have, speaking to cover over equipment because of stormwater, another requirement is a maintenance yard vehicle carport. This is one that we have, but we have more equipment that needs to be undercover. And so our goal would be to design and permit, once again, it's in the coastal zone, would require permitting, and do that in the first year and then construct it in the second year to keep all of our equipment under cover.
Would these vehicles also be using the wash rack in the operation area? On the field?
Possibly, but Primarily, it was fire trucks and the sweeper were the main ones. And also to provide an area for the airlines to have a place to wash their equipment as well. The tugs that they have or whatever that needs to be washed, but can't leave the airfield because they're not roadworthy. So we could wash airport vehicles there as well.
What's the number? Has anyone looked at the total amount of vehicles? Because you're adding traffic to movement areas.
They would stay in a vehicle lane, and
They
which
wouldn't-
is
They wouldn't be in a
area.
active movement area.
Do you have to cross taxiways to get to the current wash rack now, though? You'd have to have a radio.
No, they do. I mean, all those, they're on the airfield every day, all those vehicles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and in the location of the wash rack, that part of Taxiway Charlie is decommissioned. It's not an active taxiway where you would cross to go to the new fire maintenance road over by Ampersand. So you'd go that direction, then come straight off of that fire maintenance road to the new wash
On the
rack by
east
the helicopter landing areas. Yes, it's on the east end.
On the east end.
Uh-huh.
So the approach for aircraft now, you're on a taxiway and you come off of Charlie, and you're saying you're going to have a separate entrance from the east end that would be for the vehicles?
There's a vehicle maintenance road that parallels Charlie. And if you're going east towards Ampersand facility, there at where it joins close to Ampersand, that part of Charlie is decommissioned. It's considered ramp. There's also a fire maintenance road that goes around the Ampersand ramp area and connects, and then loops around the end of 25. Off of that fire maintenance road by the helicopter landing area and the existing aircraft wash rack, that's where this new facility would be
Okay.
for the wash.
And like I said, all those vehicles have radios and operate on the airfield every day.
All the time.
Our administration vehicles are not included in that, and they go to a regular car wash.
My concern was mixing traffic, maybe without communications with the aircraft.
Right.
And I wasn't aware that part was decommissioned. I thought that the taxiway markings continued all the way down past the signature area.
It decommissions right at Hotel. I mean,
At
Juliet.
Juliet.
I'm sorry. At Juliet. Past Juliet East, it's decommissioned. Taxiway Charlie, yes. I mean, Charlie stops at Juliet.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. The other, as we do every year, we set aside funding for routine ordinary maintenance. The one item that we have removed from this list is hazardous materials, because we're pretty much caught up with that, and that's just moving to our operational budget in the next year. The FAA projects that we're putting together, which will be submitted between now and February in the Airport Capital Improvement Plan, it's a really important one for us, and it's to update our airport master plan. With the terminal, we're pretty much done with all of our projects that we've identified over the years, so we need to update that plan. Focus this time, a majority of that will be on general aviation, so we're looking forward to that. I estimated cost of the plan, not including a complete environmental. It would be nice if we could do that, but we're thinking $750,000, and it is fundable through FAA at 5% match. The other projects are airfield related, and once again, Taxiway Charlie, Hotel Juliet need to be rehabbed, and also we need to either add shoulders or replace shoulders. Part of that is to assist us with maintenance responsibilities, reduce our maintenance because they require to be mowed, and so we're looking forward to it. This is divided up into 2 years because of the cost trying to get that done. This is a summary of projects. Thank you. That's no. A summary of those that are funded with airport dollars, and I know it's busy, but to give you a full look, and you have at your place setting a complete copy with pictures of the capital program. So this is the airport funded, and the next one would be FAA. So unlike prior years where we had almost $100 million in projects between the terminal and the airfield, it seems kind of modest at a total of only $28 million. But that's before the master plan. So these dollars will go up. So at this point, that's the plan that we have. As Commissioner Miller mentioned, we did meet with Budget on the 25th. They recommended some additional information for Commission, and at this point, we'd ask that you recommend moving it forward with any comments to City Council.
Okay, thank you for, again, an excellent presentation. The Budget Subcommittee did also review this. I know my feeling was that, they were, good projects, kind of stewardship of all that expensive pavement out there, and then also taking care of stormwater issues with the wash racks and the vehicle coverage, both items that really need to be addressed. Any questions, comments?
I have one parting comment, and that has to do really more with the long-range plan of the airport, strategic planning, because that falls into your, ultimately into your capital planning. You have some major leaseholds that are going to be coming up in the next 5 years or so that will change the face of your commercial leasing here on this side of the fence. And it will be a capital call. There'll be a lot of dollars expended to take back those properties, reconfigure things. So I look forward to that process. Hopefully I'll be around. But that would be a major event. It would be a major event. And I'm sure probably part of your master plan study, right?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And we've kind of had this plan in mind, in terms of priorities, dealing with the runway safety issues, the terminal, and now general aviation will have its day, and for planning new facilities on this side of the airport. So
It's worth reminding
It'd be fun.
everyone, I think, that there will most certainly be a great deal of community involvement in the
Absolutely.
same way that the terminal project brought so many different groups together.
Right,
It's a
absolutely.
real exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank Hazel for a great presentation and also for not running off.
She tries, but
I do try running on.
she's glued to her seat there.
She did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Second that. I'd like to make a motion then to recommend the budget as presented by Ms. Hazel, along with just a recognition of the staff's hard work in putting it together.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Seconded?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And so recommended.
Last
Thank you.
choice.
Okay, and now, item 15, proposed airline rates and charges. I think this was actually the lease review subcommittee reviewed this proposal as well, and we have a presentation.
Just to bring you up to date, after Karen's excellent airline service, I hate to come back and say, well, yeah, but we're going to raise the rates, but that's what's happening. You know that we don't have lease agreements with the airlines. They have operating permits in Santa Barbara. That's something that we anticipate will continue in the future, even in the new building. We look at rates on an annual basis. But you'll recall with the economic times of 2008, prior to the collapse of the financial industry, the fuel prices were just skyrocketing, and the airlines were really hurting at that time. So we recommended that we maintain the rates that we had established in 2007, actually. And those were $66.81 per square foot for building space on an annual basis and $1.98 per 1,000 pounds for the landing fee. We also at that time established the employee parking fee for all airline employees, for all employees, but airline employees, $3.47. Things didn't get better in 2008, 2009, so once again, we recommended maintaining those. In 2008, we had 6 carriers and 12 nonstop destinations. In 2010, we have 5 carriers and 5 nonstop destinations. We do have Frontier Airlines that just began in June, and they really are doing an excellent job and are being well patronized. I mean, their load factors are high, and they're pleased with that service. Anticipating the new terminal, though, in the spring of 2001, and the fact that we have debt service and will be budgeting that in the next year, it was time to take a look at the rates, get back with the airlines, and establish some new costs, or some new revenue streams. We also wanted to switch from an October to September period for the rates to one that is consistent with our city budget, which is July to June. In order to do that, we needed to shift the methodology beginning in July 2011. But to get us through this year, we're using the old methodology that we have for years, where we look at our actual expenses for the prior year, establish a per square foot rate, and try to offset it as best we can with other sources of revenue. Even doing that, the rate is $80 per square foot. Landing fees, we have made several adjustments to the actual airfield costs and have offset that with GA landing fees as well, because part of the expenses on the airfield are attributable to general aviation landings. So this year, landing fees will go up to $2.50. So staff prepared the rates and the backup information, and then we met with the airlines September. It was September, I believe, like September 26th. And we had all representatives from SkyWest, U.S. Airways, American Eagle, Frontier. We had all of them here and provided the information. They elected a chairman of their group, which was SkyWest, and they they had Steve DeWiggins, who's with SkyWest Airlines, as their lead negotiator. After looking at all the rates and the background information, he coordinated with the other airlines to reach consensus, and these are the rates that will be going forward in their new agreements. We'll come back to Airport Commission with the new methodology using July to June, using the budget for your review of that as well. We're still working on it. We just recently, this last week, sent out information to all the airlines with the proposed rates, schematics for the new terminal, square footage, that sort of thing for them to begin looking at. So we'll have more discussions on that. But at this time, we'd like to have Airport Commission concur with staff's recommendation on the rates and recommend that we proceed with City Council authorization or approval of the rates.
I was curious, was there negotiation and then you met in the middle? Or was it presented and they accepted?
Actually, the building rate, we didn't have a lot of discussion. The landing fee is down from what it actually, I mean, if we do it based on our cost, it was like $3.74. I mean, it was higher than the parking, employee parking rate. If you consider the costs for the airfield with ARF and patrol, and then maintenance, and a modest maintenance amount. I mean, the biggest items, of course, are security as well as the ARF. It is a lot for a small hub airport. The other thing that happened, as I mentioned, we had 12 destinations, and now we have 5. When the airlines pulled those planes out, our landed weights went way down. And if you're basing next year on what you currently have, I'm not real optimistic that it's going to leap back up and we're going to gain that loss in 1 year's time. So as soon as the landed weights went down, the per gross or the fee went up
Sure.
substantially.
Right.
They didn't argue with that. And I said, if you can demonstrate you're going to add flights, change out the equipment, increase the weight, I'd be happy to change it. But they agreed, and then we did kind of negotiate, and we brought it down to $250, which is an increase from $1.98, 1,000 pounds.
I think there, in previous year presentations, there were comparisons to other airports, but I can't remember how it compares with other airports, these rates.
The actual rates, each airport does it differently. Some have residuals, but what we do measure is cost per in-plane passenger. That's how the airlines look at it, for what they're paying us per in-plane passenger. And I believe for the year ending June 30th, our rate was $5.26 or something like that per in-plane passenger, very low on the scale. The normal range is between $7.50 and $8 per in-plane passenger. So ours were low. They recognized that, for 3 years our rates were maintained, and they appreciate that, and I think that's why there wasn't as much, there was really no backlash from the proposed rates from the airlines.
The cost that you had presented, I think the historic cost per in-plane passengers, 2010, $5.65.
Oh, 65, okay.
Which, as you pointed out, is still lower than any comparable airports. Yes.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that we talked about in the subcommittee was, my personal take on this was to try to, as we start afresh with this new terminal, new expenses, new baseline expenses, that, I think our overarching goal is to pass through actual expenses. And what a common practice in the commercial real estate field is to put together a budget based on, historical, bill, and then reconcile either quarterly or semi-annually, monthly, annually, whatever the case may be, so that you have a set of open books. We thought it was going to cost X, it turned out to be X plus 2. Here's the bill for the plus 2, right? Rather than trying to absorb expenses. So I think it's just something that we need to do, and like you're doing elsewhere with some of your new facilities, to incorporate reserves in those budgets, capital reserves for replacement. I think it's a common practice, and I think it's something we ought to take a hard look at.
Thank you.
Okay.
Quick question, just, I would think that I would be remiss in not asking about the parking, as it has not changed in a number of years, and our constituency may ask, as parking for every other aspect of the public continues to rise. Could you explain how that was arrived at, or why it did not change?
The employee parking rate did go up.
I thought it was the same.
Shouldn't be. It didn't go up dramatically, but I believe it went from $3.47 to $3.54.
My
I believe
apologies.
that's right. Just a touch. And the way that we calculate that is to look at the cost for the shuttle from Lot 2 to the terminal, since that's the employee parking lot as well as overflow parking. We took the total cost. We subtracted out any parking revenue from passengers to get to a net. Then we took the net divided by the number of employees, by the number of days, to arrive at the daily rate.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we've been asked to recommend to the City Council, or recommend that the City Council approve these proposed rates.
I'll recommend approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of approving proposed rates?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the proposed rates are recommended to be approved. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the 2010 fiscal year end financial review and another presentation.
I'll do this one, then you won't hear from me for months after this.
Promises.
I'll believe it when I see it.
No respect whatsoever. 2010, as you know, ended June 30th, but we always are delayed in getting our final cost and all of the adjustments made by downtown, and we still don't have our reserves reported out yet. That comes with the completion of the city's audit. So that will come back to you hopefully next month. But when we put together the budget for 2010, we were concerned about the economy. We were concerned about the status of the airline industry. So we really wanted to be conservative as best we could, meet our needs, take care of our facilities, and also meet our revenue projections that we've been working with for the terminal. And so we did that. And so we set a budget that totaled for the revenue projections in the budget were $12,440,678. So as you can see on this chart, we exceeded our revenues with $12,788,000. The next chart, so to give you a little information, commercial industrial traffic was up, or not traffic, industrial rentals were up, even with the moratorium that Airport Commission had recommended for 1 year, which ended in September. Then we went back and we worked with our lease review subcommittee, and we recommended not a 3% increase, but a 1.5% increase. That's gone over really well. But in addition, Rebecca's done a terrific job in renting our vacant properties, and is still daily people come in and try to create yards where we don't have them, but we are renting properties. So commercial industrial revenue was up 6.8%, which is terrific. Non-commercial aviation had a positive variance of a 10.5%. As you know, GA landing fee started in January, and we haven't had any complaints at all about that from the users. MAG Aviation came in and began self-service fueling in April. We don't have a lot of revenue this year for that, but since it's 5 cents a gallon is what we're receiving off of that. But we do see that GA traffic is building up some, and I know that they appreciate the cheaper fuel. The airline terminal was almost 1% below target. We did have a decline. Now, these numbers are for a fiscal year basis. When I mentioned passenger traffic down 4%, it's fiscal year, not calendar year. And parking is going to track with employments. It was down 3.8. Concession revenue was up. The gift shop's back in the lobby, and the restaurant has a really good manager, and that makes a huge difference. Commercial aviation was 1.6% above, and that was just with the airlines and the landed fees. Other revenues fell. Interest, as you know, is not doing well, and City Invest our revenues as well as all of the cities together. But we did have TSA reimbursement, which continued and exceeded what we anticipated. So the total revenue for, as I said, was $12,788,000, or 2.8% above our budget. However, it was 1.9% below revenues for 2009, and it was down 8% from the revenues that we received in 2008. Operational expenditures, once again, were under budget because we had operational expenditures of $12,849,958. You'll notice that salaries were under. Furlough savings, that was an additional 5%. That's for administration and the general unit. The patrol officers were in a different agreement. They took a cut in pay as opposed to delayed a pay increase. Supplies and services were down. ARF exceeded budget. Engineering, special projects is the shuttle for the employees and passengers. Equipment, we bought a new sweeper, but that was FAA money. Allocated cost is also on target. This chart gives you an illustration of actual for 09 versus 10 for salaries and benefits. Furlough, you'll notice, is below the line since it was a savings. Supplies and services. So we're tracking a little bit under each one except for a couple. ARF in particular, and then associated or allocated costs are on target. At the Budget Subcommittee, there was a request for additional information regarding the ARF expenses. This gives you some background on salaries and benefits, which we were below. We still have vacant positions, the mandatory furlough that I mentioned, and then ARF and Public Works. And I believe we have a slide, the next one perhaps, on ARF. You know that we have 9 firefighter positions, and that covers 3 shifts. The increase in their overall budget was 2.73 above the budget. It was due to salary, overtime, and benefit costs. And ARP expenses were greater in 2010 than in 2009. And I'm sure they'll be up again next year. Allocated costs were actually down. That reflects the change in staffing levels at City Hall, as well as the reduction in furlough savings downtown. Special project, the shuttle was also under budget, and we had savings in equipment, maintenance, and fuel savings for that particular project. Summary, the airport met its operational and capital needs. Once again, we exceeded revenues and came in under budget. And that concludes my report.
All right, well, thank you. Again, a tribute to a lot of hard work managing your budget very carefully. And thank you for that presentation. Questions?
I just want to say how pleased and impressed I am with the way that you have done this over the years, knowing that we are protecting that and you are, and running it as though it were your own personal budget, and looking at these, and your projections are always very conservative, and we come out a little better, and I'm just very impressed and proud. Thanks, John.
And one comment that I'd like to make from the subcommittee, the reason why we asked Hazel to feature this ARF expenditure, this burden, is because it is a significant line item. It's about 10% of your operating expenses, of which you really don't have any control of. But it's a significant line item, and it really needs to be treated as with some special focus. So I didn't see that the figure was necessarily mentioned up there, but it does give an impact when you talk relative to our total budget. It's about 10%. It's about $1.7 million. So it's a significant line item.
And part of that discussion was about helping the public understand, the expense that does go into keeping the airport safe and the travelers safe.
It's an insurance program.
Right. And in fact, I was going to mention at the end after the director's report, but this seems an opportune time since I know at least Commissioner Colbert is quite interested in the ARF operation. Last week at the EAA meeting, the EAA was given a tour of the ARF facility. In fact, Carl Hopkins arranged that, and apologized for not being able to be here, one of our more loyal attendees. And it was very interesting to see their very specialized equipment and the level of training that goes on to continue to keep that proficiency there. Especially in light of the fact that they're not out there every day, putting out fires in aircraft or anything. So they do have to. There's a lot of work to maintain that. And I know that they expressed that they were certainly interested in, or always willing to provide tours of the facility. And if that's something that the commission might be interested in, I would imagine that it could be easily arranged. If there's interest as preface to one of our meetings.
Probably not been in one, huh?
Is that of general interest?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Scott's never been in a fire station.
Oh, well, okay. Perhaps we could coordinate that for in front of one of our meetings at some point. That would be
certainly.
useful. I'll mention that they also mentioned that I believe it was at least 2 of the very senior fire staff are actually retiring in the very near future, some very close to 30-year employees, so I don't know if that means they'll be replaced by less senior and possibly less expensive staff. Well, it could happen. But anyway, I just wanted to pass that on, and yeah, if you'd be so kind as to arrange something like that, I think it would be very useful. Okay, other questions, comments? All right. I don't believe we have are being asked for a recommendation there, other than just to receive the report, which we have, and thank you again for that excellent report. And that brings us to the director's report.
Okay. I'll make it short since I covered a lot of air service information, and Hazel covered a lot of financial information. Our passenger count for September as compared to last September was up 2.4%. Year-to-date, compared to the same period last year, we're up 1.2%. So I think that we're headed in a good direction, and having Frontier obviously has helped us stay on the positive side. The airline terminal project is going along very well. I don't know what this rain, this last few days of rain that we've had will affect the schedule, but we're moving right along. They've made a lot of progress on the inside, so we'll have to arrange a tour for you to kind of catch up and see where we are. And in terms of that, the public arts program is coming right along. Tomorrow I'm going out to the Lorianne David, who's the artist for the medallion. She's started putting all the little mosaic pieces together on the floor, and I think that'll be pretty exciting. The Pierre Clyson's Veterans Museum and Library is interested in sponsoring a piece of art that pays tribute to the Marine Air Corps Station and the role of the Marines here during World War II. So we're working with them on a request for proposal that should go out very shortly to solicit an artist for that piece. The mural, the Channing Peak mural, is here at the airport finally in one of our buildings, and the person that will be restoring the mural will start work tomorrow. So that's moving along as well. And our concessions, they've submitted their plans to the building department, correct? And so they're moving along also. So aside from the construction, a lot of the behind-the-scenes work is continuing to be accomplished. I think that was all that I wanted to point out. So if you have any other items you'd like me to speak to, I'd be happy to.
I know on the topic of murals, we had our local artist in the youth mural, and there was a lot of interest in perhaps leveraging that in some of your advertising material. Has anything moved forward on that? Or?
Yeah, I spoke to Terry Gibson, our marketing coordinator, about it, and her concern was it didn't really, in itself, didn't fit in with our kind of our look. I don't know, that's probably not the right word. But kind of all of our stuff is branded, and it didn't really kind of fit in with that. We got a lot of good press, and continue. I still get people asking me about it or saying they saw it. So hopefully we'll be able to incorporate it in other ways, and just continuing to be part of our public arts program in some way.
Thank you. And I guess another topic that I know I've asked you about an email several weeks ago was our ILS and how things are going with that. I know we've had some ongoing issues, and what I'd be interested in, I'm sure we all would be, what steps have been taken to improve the reliability of that, which is...
As far as I know, it has, we've been able to ascertain, it has really nothing to do with the shift in the runway. It's been different pieces of the equipment that have gone out and, parts were ordered and didn't come in for a period of time. My main concern is that we weren't, the airport wasn't notified. We had to wait until we got complaints from either a pilot or the airlines were, upset because flights couldn't get in. But we've tried to impress upon the FAA that we really would like to be notified so that we can prepare ourselves. There's not anything we can do about it, but prepare that when we speak to the public or the flying public that what the reason is and when it will be back up. So that's basically what the explanation has been.
I believe you told me it was something approaching 30 flights that had been diverted.
There were a lot that one time, yeah, a lot.
So there's no mechanism in place that someone's automatically notified the ILS system's down?
Well, they might put out a notice to airmen, but and our operations people will check maybe once or twice a day, but if they don't check at the right time, they might miss it. And so that's not good enough notification. I mean, I appreciate, a phone call and some explanation of what's wrong and how long it's going to take to repair, which the notice to airmen would not say.
But we have made contact directly with FAA facilities and
Right.
Several times.
Yeah.
Talked with them specifically and expressed our frustration and dismay that we didn't know about it.
It's an education with the tower personnel, and has it been relieved? I mean, now they keep you in the loop.
Well, Tracy did speak with the facilities. People are different than the tower. Well, you know that, being a former controller. But we didn't get notified by either facilities or the tower personnel. But Tracy has spoken with them and emphasized that we want to know right away when it happens and have some explanation of why and when they project that it will be back in service. Because it's really difficult to answer phone calls when you don't know. Well, first of all, when the caller is telling you that it's out, and then you don't know why or how long it's going to be. So I think that we have resolved the communication issue.
And Karen, just by assumption, therefore, the ILS system is maintained by the
FAA.
FAA.
It's owned and maintained by.
Thank you.
Is it a possibility for them to stock replacement parts here or closer? Or has that been investigated? And
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Friends in the federal government?
It was manufactured in 1955.
Okay. Well, I'm sure no one feels the pain more than you do. So
Hear the pain.
Hear the pain. Right. Okay, other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any presentation to the city council between now and our next meeting that you're aware of?
No, none that we have planned.
Thank you.
But thanks. I appreciate that you were able to come.
Okay. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded. In favor?
Go.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstentions?
Hazel, you can run off now.
Can I run off now? Okay.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent meeting.